start the meeting, and he should get here before we get into the depth of our meeting. At this time, I'll call the January 29th, 2024 meeting of the Newcastle Planning and Zoning Commission to order. First item of business will be roll call.
Gordon Harness.
Present.
Carl Evans is absent. Jared Bennett.
Here.
Will Wright.
Here.
And Keith Claiborne is absent.
We do have a quorum, so we can open business and proceed. Item number 2 is to consider approval of the agenda as presented. Are there any requests?
Yes, there, and you'll see there in your packet, 10 and 11 have been continued.
We'll note that items 10 and number 11 have been continued at the applicant's request. Is there any need to wait anything now? Motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Have a motion second to approve the agenda, subject to the 2 continuances. All in favor? It can be unanimously approved. Item number 3 is to consider approval of the minutes from our December 18th, 2023 regular meeting. And anybody have any corrections to that? I hadn't found any.
I'll make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Have a motion second to consider to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor signify with be unanimously approved. Item number 4 is the report of the City Council's decisions on Planning Commission recommendations of our last meeting. You want to begin?
Sure. Planning items for the Newcastle 2040 comprehensive plan and future land use map was presented by our consultants, Guernsey, and it was approved by council with a vote of 5-0. And then the only other item that we had was a rezoning request in the Grigsby addition for the Hensons. It was a request to go from agriculture to E2, and they meet the minimum lot area for the E2 1 acre requirement, and that was approved by City Council as well.
Item number 5 is continuance request, and we noted those in items 10 and 11. Item number 6 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to be heard on matters not on our agenda tonight. Do we have anyone wanting to be heard on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed. Item number 7 is lot split deed approvals. There's none listed, so we don't have any. Item number 8 is a public hearing to consider an application for rezoning from E3 Residential Estates District to PUD Planned Unit Development for Chez Investment Group LLC and Blue Ridge Estates LLC, located in the southeast quarter of Section 6 and the northeast quarter of Section 7, Township 8 North, Range 3 west of the Indian Meridian, McLean County, Oklahoma. The property address is generally located on the north side of Southeast 44th Street, west of Pennsylvania Avenue, Newcastle, Oklahoma. This is R 2023-012, and this is a matter we have continued to this date.
This request, R 2023-012, was a rezoning from E3 Residential Estate District to PUD Planned Unit Development for Chez Investment Group LLC and Blue Ridge Estates LLC, the owner and developer. Up here on the screen, you can see that this on the left side. This is the rezoning request outlined in red. And on the right side is the current zoning, which is E3. This request from E3 to PUD is to go to half-acre lots. It was approved to go to E3 back in 2015, since that time when the preliminary plat and the rezoning was approved, their preliminary plat had expired. So they came back in to talk with staff about potential rezoning and to correct the plat that was approved, and go on with future development. So it's a revised preliminary plat and rezoning to the PUD for the half-acre lots. Surrounding zoning is ag to the north, to the east, and south is E3, and west is ag as well. The surrounding land uses, to the north, you got some vacant agricultural land. To the east is residential single-family dwelling and vacant ag land. To the south is the Blue Ridge Estate 1 and 2, and to the west is ag land. This rezoning includes 75.87 acres to a PUD, and then we use the underlying zoning of the E3 Residential Estates District. Just a little bit of background in this area. I'll go back up to the first slide. So Blue Ridge Estates, to the south here, we included two because there were some undersized lots that didn't meet the 27,000 square foot lot requirement in the E3 district. So we included that to correct those minimum lot areas. And the section line, 40th Street here, that goes out to Penn to the east, is required in this development to be opened. And so with the request to go to the half-acre lot and opening that, it also gave them the access onto 40th Street, so they have that secondary access, which is required by our fire code as well. So staff had worked with them to make sure that they are not impeding that section line, and putting locks over that section line. So they took staff's direction, and we came up with the PUD that allows them to go to the half-acre lots, which still will meet the on-site septic, as well as, like I said, the access for this development, providing that secondary access.
On the existing lots from the prior, or the prior, the preliminary plat, they aren't changing any of those lots.
They are not changing any of
So
those
there's
lots.
some of those that will actually still be E3 lots.
There'll be, a lot of them are very close to that 27,000 square feet minimum. We were talking maybe several hundred to a couple hundred square feet.
They
that
just
didn't
had
meet
some
it.
of them that didn't
Correct,
meet
just
that, but the rest
seven of them total,
Okay.
but the rest of them
do.
met
So
that.
they'll be compatible with the lots that have been developed south of where they're drawing their pipeline.
Correct.
Okay.
So to the north here, you have Redmond Ridge that was approved by City Council in 2005. It opens up and has access onto Pennsylvania as well. These are all half-acre lots.
Yeah.
Stonebrook, which is on the
I'm not, I mean, excuse me, but I'm not concerned about the size of putting half acre in there as much as we've done a little bit of this development, 5/8 acres, and the people that are on those lots are gonna have compatible housing surrounding them under this new PUD, because they're using the old layout.
correct.
So I'm just, that's where I was going from. I
Right.
don't oppose the half acre on as we go north.
Right.
Because I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But that's why I was asking. It was
Oh,
more,
okay.
It'll protect those existing lots from being, having downsized lots.
Yeah, the existing
coming
lots
in
are already
next to them.
platted. They are not changing.
Yeah,
Those
okay.
aren't changing. Just giving you some similar approvals in this area
Yeah,
that had been approved, with the half-acre lots that are also PUDs is Remington Ridge, Stonebrook, which is on the east side of Pennsylvania, coming out onto, 10
Right.
half-acre lots, as well as a PUD, and then Diamond Estates are all half-acre and a PUD. So all of those were approved by City Council in the 2005. Stonebrook was 2003. Diamond Estates was 2005 as well. So this request for the PUD staff does support and recommend approval for this request for the rezoning from E3 to PUD. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
If you would like to come up and state your name and address.
My name is Mike Quarry, and I live at 3830 Kilby in Remington Ridge. And is now the appropriate time to talk about the opening of Southeast 40th to Penn, or is that a later item? And concerns about that, about people that already live along Penn?
It's both. Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
That's
Sorry,
okay,
I
it's really both. I was gonna ask for public comments in a little bit, so. we'll
Okay,
just
well,
go
I'll
ahead
sit
and
down and,
Well, we'll take yours now. Go
okay.
ahead.
Well, there's concern about Penn because from Highway 9 to where the Southeast 40th Street is, it's in horrible shape. And it's narrow. And, you know, we added, there were 34 housing units added north of us there. And I can't remember the name of the addition, the one north of Remington Ridge. You know, and if you say, okay, the average household has 2 cars, that's 68 more cars. And now we're going to add access to, I don't know how many units are actually going to be built
75.
down there. How
I
many?
believe it's 75.
75.
Mhm.
Again, if you use average of 2 cars per household, that's 150. And Penn is dangerous right now
Very dangerous.
from Highway 9 up to that. Now, north of Southeast 40th, it's not too bad, but
Still very dangerous.
yeah, it's dangerous because there's no lines. It's very faded from, you know, sun exposure. And when it's raining, you know, you can't see where the road's at and where it is. And it hasn't been repaired in quite a while. I mean, every once in a while, you know, the city will come out and dump some asphalt in the holes, but within 2 or 3 months and a couple of rainstorms, that's gone. And also the interface from Highway 9 to Pennsylvania Avenue is, I mean, there's just chuck holes all there. And you got cars coming down Highway 9, 65 miles an hour. You got to get off the intersection. There's no turn lane. It's a solid line with a rumble strip. So by law, you're not supposed to get into that rumble strip or the shoulder to turn right. We'd like to see a turn lane there too, especially if you're going to increase the amount of traffic. I mean, are there plans on the books to resurface and redo Highway 9? And I really think it needs to be widened too, but that's a difficult proposal because there's a half dozen mailboxes that are sitting right on the road, which is another liability or danger also.
The Highway 9 is, but technically, a state issue as far as widening it and maintaining it. The Pennsylvania
I think you meant
maintenance
something.
is a city
I
matter.
think you meant to say Penn.
Yeah.
You meant to say why you didn't, right?
Widen Penn. Yeah,
I
sorry.
think you said
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
The right-of-way elements there, my recollection is right, kind of restricts the ability to widen it this time. The improvement of it, the city has a progressive maintenance program that we're just gonna have to rely on. I'm sure they'll be fixing it, but it'll,
Well, how much off of the center line are the easements where you could, you know, infringe and just add a foot on each side maybe? I mean, what is it?
well, the statutory section line easement is 33 feet, 16 and a half on each side.
Okay.
And then if there's been development along, it's possible that as we have had people develop on site, along the side of the road, we ask for additional easements and have gotten those often. It wasn't a mandatory deal that we were always able to enforce. So there's some of those sections that may have additional space there at this time, but I can't tell you what each easement along that section is, but statutorily, what we know is there is 32 feet.
Okay.
And
Well, I
and to
just
be a
think,
collector, and the city needs to look to
Yeah.
the, upkeep maintenance on that section for sure. I'm sympathetic for what you're saying, yeah.
well, I just believe if you're going to dump another, if there's 75 units, 100, 150 cars on it, there's going to be a big liability. And the fact that I've put it on the record now, does that make the city liable if we have a accident of some kind? I'm not wanting an answer. I'm just saying this is something y'all may want to consider.
I think is probably the better phrase. And,
Sure.
And yes, and I think that's positive that you're here telling us as planning commission members, and I'd invite you to come to city council and tell them too.
Okay.
That they will, I mean, they're sensitive to these issues, and we're trying to keep up with their growth.
Yeah. And what I think we would like to see, if there's other people here too, is something similar that was done on Southeast 32nd from May to Highway 66. It was resurfaced and lines, outside lines and center lines. It was just recently done.
Right.
It's very nice. And the lines give you a reference in low light, low visibility situations to kind of see where you're at, because right now you can't.
I know the restriping or the striping program is in progress in the city for major streets, and I think Pennsylvania probably qualifies.
Is there a
And
formal
I
plan?
don't know, I can't tell you what times schedule and which ones are. I know that they've started and they've done some, and I think it'll progress because those areas, it is a successful thing to get done, as you observe.
Okay. I think that's all I've got.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I would like to add that I did speak with the city manager today, and when they come in, and do a final plat for this last section, that the city, beyond on their portion of the statutory right of way on 40th, we will improve that 33 feet from Pennsylvania west to that property line, where they will do that improvement. So on 40th, it is planned when they come in that we are going to improve 40th and
To there, to where it ties in.
to where it ties in. That's correct.
One of my questions. We're doing it as a city or the
Yes,
county?
the city will be.
We're doing it.
It's a city road.
It is, okay.
It is
Yeah, the county won't come back up into our city and do
a city
it.
road. And as far as the CIP goes, I don't have any information where that is. I'd have to talk with street. Oh, capital improvements program. Sorry.
Okay.
Where they are in as far as Pennsylvania goes, and looking at it, I just pulled up Google Earth, and I mean, it's an asphalt road. It does not have lines, but it's something that I could probably find out before city council.
Well, and I think that, again, if you'll come and comment, it'll bring it to their attention, and I happen to know from meetings I've been in that Pennsylvania is known to be a street that they're planning to do improvement work on, but I can't tell you.
Well, who would be responsible for the interface between the recent work that was done on Highway 9 and Pennsylvania? There's where the seam was done for the shoulder, and then Pennsylvania, I mean, there's just 6 or 7 big chuck holes there, and they're getting bigger, and it's only going to get worse with spring rains and everything. So who is responsible for the interface? I mean, was whoever did Highway 9, were they supposed to do the interface, or is the city responsible?
It appears that this matter will go to the city council, so it'll be on their next agenda, which is the first Monday, or second Monday next month. So that's probably as fast as you'll get any reaction to being able to contact someone.
Okay.
And I would suggest you do it there. I could stick you on the street department to contact them and let them know, but that they get that and they look and say it's on our improvement plan, and they aren't as sensitive as perhaps our council members will be. So come to that meeting.
Okay.
And let them know that detail also, because I think that's.
Well, the last thing I want them to do is just go out there and throw shovels full of asphalt down like they've done before, because our cars pick them up, sling it on our car, and in 2 or 3 months, the hole's back. So,
The long-term and permanent resurfacing of that, I mean, Kevin himself, city manager may know, but I'm not sure he'll know at the meeting, because that's, you gotta get into the capital improvement plan and look at where it is. You can also contact City Hall and ask for a conference with him, and he can look that sort of information up, but at the city council meeting, they won't have that detailed information available, but they'll certainly be able to hear your concerns,
Okay.
take note that it needs to be looked at, and I'm sure people are looking at it.
and that's the second Monday of each month?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. At this time, I would like the record to note that Carl Evans is joining the meeting. Isn't here. And at this time, would you like to come forward and present?
Good evening. For the record, Kendall Dillon, Craft and Toll. I'll try to be brief. Janae did a really good job of explaining. But just as a little recap, because I think where we ended last time was kind of hinging around the status of the right of way. But if you remember back in 2015, you all approved a preliminary plat. We didn't have, the statutory right of way was there. The question is whether or not it was closed at the time or reserved. I think, and Joel and Janae may be able to, but it's my understanding that the commission or the Board of County Commissioners has certainly ruled on that, and it's an open right of way. So
I'll interrupt you and throw out, they opened it subject to planning commission's approval. So I think we have to do a motion to get it on record, to go on their record, so it will be open.
and that's
Their
fine.
motion's
And
fine.
I'm not an attorney, like I say, and I think our attorneys differ with that a little bit, but nonetheless, I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to argue that. And so I think, you know, when we come in, and unfortunately your code is set up, and I don't know if it's always been 5 years for preliminary plats or if it was 2 previously. But kind of like I mentioned before, it's really difficult. It takes more than 18 months to design one and to get it built. So it's really difficult on a project of any size to kind of have it designed and built and not let a preliminary plat expire unless your code, like some municipalities, extend it another every time you do a final plat, which in my preference is, it's a great policy, right? But nonetheless, that's not yours.
Well, I think we're gonna fix it.
We have 5 years now. Preliminary plats, 5 years with 2 2-year extensions.
Right. And so unfortunately we got caught in a trap to where we've developed half of our site. Preliminary plats expired. Our intent is let's come back in with the same exact plat and get it re-extended. In visiting with staff, they're like, hey, you know, the statutory right of way's there. And obviously you got a lot of lots, off of one access point. So this is a good planning opportunity to kind of remedy those. And that's the reason and the purpose for statutory right of ways. So we worked with them. Obviously, if you look at our original preliminary plat, building that street, that water line plus the lots that we lost, it's a significant difference, right? Truthfully, it makes it to where the project's no longer viable. So in working with your staff on, hey, how can we make this a better subdivision and still the developer come out with a project that we can develop? We went to the fact of let's develop it. Let's come back in with a PUD and do half-acre lots. That allows us to kind of recoup some of that loss from what the original plat was, even though I understand that it's your prerogative. But hopefully, in good faith, you all work with this some just because it's a tough pill to swallow given the nature of your code. So that being the case, we agreed and it's like, hey, yeah, I mean, this is fine. We can justify it. It puts us back to square, makes sense. We agree with your staff. It makes a better development. So that was the reason that we dropped a half acre. Now, if you look at is half acre for some reason out of conformity with what's around us, well, obviously, as Janae mentioned, you all have the Stonebrook addition, but we actually have 2 adjoiners, one to the northeast, that is the Remington Ridge, and then Diamond Estates on the south, that are also PUDs with half acres. So it certainly is in conformity. The lots that in phase 2, which we didn't do, There was some slots over on the east that were substandard, so it's just an opportunity in this PUD to kind of correct those as well. There's obviously, it's certainly in conformance and compatible with what we're developed to the south. We feel like as an overall, this is a lot better plan. Now, it's at your discretion. So, obviously we're kind of in a little bit of a trap with the preliminary plat expiring. But if you look, it seems to certainly be compatible. I think it's a good opportunity, truthfully, and I get the sensitivity with traffic, but here's the thing. I mean, everybody produces traffic, right? And I will say, I believe $647 a lot or something, not that it creates a huge pot, but just in the new lots, not counting what you're collecting in the old, that's going to be $50,000. That at least in terms, that won't go a long ways on street widening, but it does help with striping and some different things. Again, arterials, unfortunately, that's the purpose they serve, is to carry traffic. Now, I'm always sensitive because I would never say that traffic doesn't have an impact. The reality of it is if you build one house to some level, it has an impact. But in relationship to engineering, when you look at traffic counts in terms of what really is the capacity and what stresses streets, 75 lots, or even if you take the whole addition and say, okay, the directional distribution, 100% of it went to PIN, which is obviously not going to be the case. I would say at best the counts would come 75, or maybe lots would take and come out to PIN. From a capacity standpoint, from a traffic analysis, that is pretty much negligible. Now, that being from this is how traffic engineers analyze arterial streets. But again, unfortunately, that's the nature and the purpose of arterial streets. That's the nature that statute a long time ago said this is what we're doing with that right of ways, so that it provides this type of setup to where there's ability for street interconnection and utility interconnection. So this is not only establishing another access point for the street, but you're also going to get a better water system because that water line will obviously go out and loop back in as well. So hopefully that makes some sense. That's the reason and the purpose of our PUD. It to us is basically the same preliminary plat. I know it's a few more lots, but that's in its half acre just to recoup those additional infrastructure. So I'll be happy certainly to answer any other questions that you have of me.
When you mentioned that there were some marginal lots on the east, weren't the marginal lots over on the west border?
I did say east and I misspoke. You're exactly correct.
Okay.
They
Well,
are.
That's what I thought.
No,
those
yeah,
are
I
going to be isolated into their associated lots, and they aren't that far off
Yeah,
of the 5/8. So
right.
my earlier comment, and to some extent what I think you're responding to was for the lots that are already developed down here, they're going to stay next to associated lots. The change over to half acre lots is really north of
Yes.
our section line. And so we're going to have sections of this development that are consistent and uniform. And that's
Right.
all I was trying
No,
to
that's
say.
a very good point, and sorry for my misunderstanding. It's definitely the lots on the west. In fact, I've highlighted them in red. But yes, now that this street gets built in, it's in essence an arterial that still buffers this from that to some level. But yes, this plat is filed of record, and the lot sizes do not change. So it's all that it is just making them in conformance with your code. And the purpose is because working with staff, since it kind of all goes together, we're like, hey, the easiest thing is just to include it in this PUD so that everything's rectified with this one council motion.
Yeah,
and
it
everything's
ends up,
good.
I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
You've worked good with it. But,
Yeah, and I apologize for the confusion.
that was just clarifying, make sure I was.
Nope, you're right.
Do any of the council members have questions here?
So I got one question. On the southwest corner of this new addition, portion of the addition, we've got a common area with, looks like some kind of detention in the north end of it. Does that look right?
Yes, sir. Right here.
Okay, so was that the detention there for the first part to the south, or was that strictly to the other?
That services this. Now there's a low, but that is actually to be constructed with this phase up here.
Yeah, my question is, well, did you build that previously for some reason? Because I can see that it's already there.
Well, I
I'm
don't
just
think,
curious.
it actually, it's a low,
It is a low.
but I don't think it's functioning as a detention pond.
Okay.
So it's just kind of a low spot, but since that's where the water discharges, that obviously is the place
Okay.
to make the new detention facility. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just curious what was going on.
Yeah, it's just, there's already a low there. And what you ultimately have gotten is if you go out there and look on that west side, there's a big windrow. And at some point, it's almost bigger than a windrow. And I don't know if there's a pipeline or something that went through there years ago. But it kind of, to some degree, it tries to trap that water in there a little bit. So it's kind of made a little bit of a wet and a low spot right
Yeah,
there.
yeah, I can see that. Thank you, sir.
And so the detention, do you mean that like, so it collects the water from, because that's going to go straight into my pond. So I'm questioning what that is that is going to go straight into my pond.
Yeah, I mean, respond.
Well, let me suggest that normally we don't let the audience participate at this
Okay,
stage.
I just thought
I'll
maybe I
ask,
used that.
but since
I'm
you've
sorry.
asked, we're gonna go ahead and respond to it and
Yes.
be a little less formal here than we are sometimes, but.
And so to answer the question, yes, obviously your code requires in statute that we discharge our water where the historic drainage pattern where it historically goes. So we're taking the same area that goes to that discharge point as what it was, but we are required, obviously, to not release at a rate faster than what it would be today. And that's the purpose of detention. And so what we're obligated by your code and what we always do anyways, is we put in a detention facility that captures that water and then it in essence meters it out. So for layman's terms, if you can picture taking a 5-gallon bucket and putting a soda straw on the bottom of it, and then taking another 5-gallon bucket full of water and then just dumping it in that one, it has the volume to contain it, but it lets it out a lot slower. That's how detention functions in layman terms. So that's what we would be constructing at that location. And there's some other things too. It services as a sediment pond and some things that kind of help on those ends as well.
Ma'am, would you come up
Yes,
to the podium and give us your name? And
yes, I am Mitzi Mooring. I live at 2501 Southeast 40th.
You were talking about the runoff from this pond, and it
Yes.
flows directly into your pond.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's why I was concerned of what exactly is going into that detention. Is it just runoff from the water, or is
Right.
it?
Yeah, it's a
Mine.
water detention, and as Bill had commented, it acts as a sedimentary pond to some extent. But from the other day, I gathered you're desirous of maintaining your pond. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, I definitely am. That's why we have our cattle and horses all drink from that pond. So I want to make sure it's not going to be chemicals and all that type of stuff going into that pond. It's going to affect my livestock.
It'll be normal runoff, but it will be runoff from people's yards and things like that. But it'll go. In that case, you may well like it being a sedimentary pond to some degree. Okay.
And so while we're up here, you said this increases the number of houses from what it should have been 65 before to 75 now. So we're increasing. So with this, we're not just decreasing the size of lots, we're actually giving you guys more houses there, correct?
Yeah. I mean,
So it's going to increase like our water that we get, like going to use that more of our water that supply that comes to us. Like we get, in the summertime, we all have to like go to mandatory water rationings. Do we have enough water? If we have to ration every summer, do we have water to feed 10 more houses then? If we're already having to ration our own water?
That. What rationing has really been a distribution system. Since we've connected to Oklahoma City, it's a distribution issue more than it is water quality.
So it won't decrease the amount of water we get right now.
Other than the issue that when Oklahoma City declares rationing, we declare rationing also by contract. So, I mean, we may still see it, but I don't think there's really a problem.
Well, it shouldn't decrease the
The city
quantity that we get
The
in.
city's contracting to take adequate amount of water for our housing as it grows, and Oklahoma City is one of the advantages of that the city leaders have done is jumped on this bandwagon.
Okay.
And we get the planning of Oklahoma City for our growth as well as their growth. That's what it's about.
And then my other thing is that traffic once again. So like on Penn right now, for 2 cars to pass on Penn at one time, if there's a mailbox on this side, they either hit the mailbox or they hit their mirrors, which I've seen both happen.
Yeah.
And Penn also, we have somebody who had a tragic accident behind us who was hit by a car while she was walking down Penn. It is a very, very dangerous road for the number of cars on it at the moment. So we are all very concerned with adding 150 more cars. I know you said it's not negligible, but in a small road like that, it is very much affecting what's coming up and down that road.
I'm very sympathetic and in
Yes.
agreement on small roads, but the
Yes.
fact is, that's what fits in our right of ways. We just have a
Yes.
33-foot right of way, so
But
they're kind of
it's
designed that
Like
way.
it's much smaller than all the section lines around it. Penn is like, I don't know, like if you go down Penn, I'd have to go
It's just
measure
an old
this.
development, but it's not, it's built on the same right of way.
I think just the road part is, I'm sure the right of way is the same, but the road part itself is just much, much smaller than,
Once they do some little more work on it and restripe it, it will be amazed how much
yeah.
that makes.
So hopefully they'll do that before they get this addition like
That'd
fixed,
be nice
hopefully.
if they do, but I won't guarantee it. But yeah, it's on the plan. Okay. Well, let us continue in order that we normally would do it. I guess really on the plating would be the only question I have left is really on the plating, and we can wait until we get to that to ask it. Do
That was my only question.
you guys have anything to?
Well, yeah, the
Discuss
next
on
step
it.
is plating and discussion of the issues of detail on this, and
Janae answered my question.
Okay. I think at this time, on the rezoning, I'm ready for a motion. Okay, one minute. I'll go ahead. At this time, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the rezoning from E3 to PUD pursuant to the application.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and second. All in favor, signify with their raised hand. Be unanimously passed. This time we'll go to item 9, which is discussion.
You know, let anybody else speak on it?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll retract that.
Yeah, y'all approved it before you heard from it.
Well, okay, well, we'll back off. I'll withdraw that motion and let's vote to retract the vote.
I'll make the motion to retract the vote.
All in favor? Okay. Sorry, I still call for public comment. Go ahead. Next.
Name's Charles Wallace, 3921 South Penn. I don't have a picture up there, but on 40th, as we're opening up to Pennsylvania from the neighborhood, I would like to argue that that neighborhood already has an entrance and exit. I'd like to plead with you to have the road stubbed out and put a crash gate in to benefit your residents that already live there. I have the same concerns with the safety of Pennsylvania Avenue. My wife is the one that got hit and was metaflighted off that road and barely survived. Penn Avenue has the highest speed limit of all the roads around there, and it's one of the narrowest. I know we addressed that in a different meeting, and I'll be sure to show up to that one.
Okay, good.
But I understand it's an arterial. I understand that it's a statutory right of way. But stubbing that road out and putting in a crash gate still addresses the safety of the residents in that neighborhood. And they have a road out to Highway 9 access road, which would then divert a bunch of traffic off of Pennsylvania to help address the issue of the safety there. I'm not gonna argue the size of the lots. There's lots of the neighborhoods around.
I'll throw out that one of the concerns that I've given to the amount of traffic coming out onto the frontage road and coming to Penn to get out onto 9 is almost equally detrimental to splitting it up and having the traffic come out on Penn in 2 places, because the intersection with Penn and Highway 9 is a difficult enough intersection in its own right. And so that's another thing. I mean, that's just another area that we have to look at as to how's this traffic going to affect the area.
I understand that argument.
I think that's a factor, and so.
Yeah, that access road I don't believe has much traffic other than that neighborhood.
Yeah, that Diamond Estate, as it develops, there's traffic. But I've said at that corner, waiting for my turn before, and I mean, traffic is a problem out in this area right now. And as we grow, roads improve and that'll help, but they're growing pains getting there.
Right.
But I encourage you, as I did and you observed, come to council meeting and let them know about the situation on Penn, because I know it's been a discussion for improvements in the past, and it's on the list. I just can't tell you where it is on the list.
Right. No, I understand that. But again, it's my backyard. I've got all that traffic coming through. And, you know, I understand billing happens, improvement happens. I don't have a pocket big enough to just buy that land and keep nobody from being on it. But again, I just plead with you guys. As Newcastle residents, people have been there for decades, and others generations that are back in there.
I mean, I'm with you, and I'm a long-term resident, but I'm afraid we're growing, and some of this are growth things that we're gonna have to grow with.
Right, but you could still stub it out, crash gate. Safety's happen, entrance and exit off of.
Our subdivision regs really at this stage and this amount of development say we're supposed to have interconnecting roads.
You do have other neighborhoods that have crash gates or emergency access.
Right.
With more than your.
They have not worked with. So that's.
But you have that now.
Yeah.
It's a precedent.
It is something that we could do.
Yep.
So I was not, it's not something I favored. And in this case, we're on a section line road, which statutorily there is some access to. So we have that battle too. So there's a whole bunch going on, and I hear what you're saying. I'm sympathetic to it, but it's probably not going to change my vote. I might as well go ahead and say that, because I'm battering back and forth with you and not meaning to be argumentative. I'm just saying, as we look at the picture, I hear what you're saying.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, did you want to be heard?
Alan Hill, 3716 South Penn. I just wanted to make a little bit on Pennsylvania. The width of that, the last time they resurfaced that, you could go out there and look. They came in 6 or 7 inches on both sides. I don't know if you guys were aware of that or not, but that's how much narrower it is than how narrow it used to be. I've lived out there for 20 years more, and every time they resurface it, you got a little narrower. Then you come over here on a street, May Avenue, which has 30 houses on it, and it gets a wide berth. You know, I guess what I'm really saying is, go out and look at it. You can see the old asphalt, and of course it's broken and grass is growing up all over it now because people have to drop off when another car's coming. They try to get over and they'll drop off onto that and they'll break that stuff. You know, because it was, when they resurfaced it, I guess about 1.5 inches or something like that. So there's a little bit of a drop there. And as far as the traffic, Celebration Station came in out there, and everyone, if you'll drive by there, you'll see 3 cars in every, there'll be
2 or 3 in the drive, and then the streets would be filled up too. Each one of those households had more than 2. And it has increased the traffic in front. I get 50-mile-an-hour people, 60-mile-an-hour people go by my house all the time. And during the summer, I'm picking up all the trash all the time. And now you're saying you want to add 75 more people out there, which low estimate is 150 cars. And if they're going to come out on Penn, a lot of them's going to decide to go to 32nd. They're going to go down that way. They're going to have a wreck on that little weird dip you have there that gets really narrow. And I guess I'm asking 2 things. One, to please check how, Pennsylvania, because it is dangerous. I know people that's lost their mirrors all the time. I've lost my mailbox once. It's bad. So please check that. I'm asking that. And the other is please consider slowing down on all the approvals in this city. I know it gives money to the city, but, it's just bringing people in too, and you can't keep up with it. I've seen it all over the place. I've seen it for the last 20 or 30 years. So I would appreciate a little consideration on that to the people that already live here. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
My name is Steve Vang. I'm at 3933 South Penn. The section line is between Chuck and I. So if you guys are going to do this section line, what would the plan be? It's going to be from the center of that road to my house. I measured it the other day, and the road is going to be 7 feet from my house. 7 feet. So you're going to put a big fence up there when all this traffic is coming by. And Penn Avenue, I've got a speed gun, and a guy across the street is a police officer, Oklahoma City police officer. He's got a speed gun. I've clocked people over 80 miles an hour down Penn. I've got them right here on my phone. I went to the chief of police. And they wrote a kid a ticket, and they wouldn't fight it. The city would not fight it. They said, no, we're not doing nothing, because the kid's dad was some district, some other county. He was in the county, so they wouldn't fight the deal. I've got them on my phone there. I can go out there any day, and there's cars that are running between 55 and 65 miles an hour. And I've seen one police officer go out there and give one ticket of 72 miles an hour. And they do come up and down there every now and then, but it's during times that are slow. But if they come out there and write some tickets and find out how fast people are driving on that road, and it has to do with the one he was just talking about, the subdivision celebration, whatever it is, and the other one, those people are renting those places. They don't care. They have no commitment to this community, except they're going to be there for 6 months of the year, and they're out of there, and they fly down that road. And I wish, more cars are going to be coming out there, that we need more police officers and somebody to just go sit on the road and not even write a ticket. Just go watch for a while, and you're going to be shocked at how fast people are driving down that road. And what happened to Julie is nothing compared to what's going to happen, because when they come from Highway 9 over that hill doing 65, 70 miles an hour, I know the people who next door to me on the other side of the pond, they're scared to go check their mail because they're afraid a car's going to come over and kill them, come over that hill. And now we're going to add more vehicles. And if cars are going to be coming out by my house, I guess you guys are going to put in a street light there too.
We're really the wrong body to be telling this to, other than we're interested. And I talk to council, and generally commissioners here talk to council members from time to time, and I'm more often than some of the others maybe, but we talk to them, so we can convey some of these information. I encourage you to come to the council meeting. This will give you the format to address them and let them know these things.
Well, like I said, I went to 4 different places in the city, and they didn't do anything about these speeders out there. One ticket was written for 72 miles, going faster on highway, on Penn than they are Highway 9. Think about that. Down Penn on that narrow road. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this matter? Do any of the commissioners wish to comment? Have any further discussion on the zoning part? This time I'll reassert my motion that we recommend approval of the approval of the PUD from E3 zoning per the application.
I'll second again.
Motion second, all in favor, signify with the raised hand. Be passed unanimously. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action on revised preliminary plat of the Blue Ridge Estates.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Joel Dixon, interim city engineer. So, as has been discussed, for Blue Ridge Estates, the original preliminary plat was proposed in 2015, but the final plat for phase 3, which is the current phase under consideration, could not meet the timing requirements of our ordinance at that time. So here we are with the re-preliminary plat for phase 3 of Blue Ridge Estates. It comprises 73 single-family lots covering just shy of 48 acres. So as we've discussed fairly extensively, in addition to connecting two previous phases to the south, it will also connect to the east on to Penn from Southeast 40th Street. This will provide additional emergency access as is required by the International Fire Code, which we have adopted as part of our city ordinances. This section line road was removed from its reserve status and deemed open by unanimous approval of the Board of McLean County Commissioners during their regular meeting on 18 December of last year.
Do you have that motion and resolution?
I have.
Okay, it requires our approval to make that work, right?
They removed it from the reserve status.
Subject to the approval.
So if my understanding is if Planning Commission approves this development, they approve Southeast 40th Street. Okay. So
that's not my reading of it.
But that's my understanding.
But it all works together.
Correct. Obviously, there would be little need for Southeast 40th Street if there was no development.
Right. Okay, we can go on.
So from the Phase 2 drainage report and from the preliminary plat that we see in front of us, drainage for the west half of Phase 3 is planned to flow to the southwest towards the detention pond in that corner. And for the east half, it will flow to the southeast to the detention pond in that corner of the development. As is required by our ordinance, post-development flows will not exceed pre-development flows. And in order to maintain continuity with the previous two phases, we are allowing the developer to use uncurbed streets with bar ditches. Those bar ditches will be within private drainage easements that will be maintained by the HOA. All of the 73 lots will be served by private on-site sanitary sewer systems for a density of 1.5 septic systems per acre or 0.65 acres per system. 8-inch water mains will serve much of the development. However, along Southeast 40th Street, which is a section line road, it will be a 12-inch water line as required by our ordinance. And the applicant is meeting our parkland requirements by installing playground and park benches as part of the 2.2 acres encompassing common area E. This preliminary plat complies with the City of Newcastle regulations, and staff recommends approval of this preliminary plat, subject to your questions.
One question I have is, on the section line road setback, are the side yard setbacks of the adjoining lots set back far enough to allow the required section line setback?
20 feet.
Yes, so they have a 60-foot right-of-way for the section line road, and then there's an additional 20-foot setback for the lots that are fronting onto that, or Yeah.
So they'll give us 30 and 20 is 50
50
feet.
feet off the center line.
And that's what our setback requires, right?
yes. So, and it is to be noted that that 60-foot right-of-way is within this particular development. Once they move off of the property, then it reverts to the statutory 33-foot right-of-way. So that 700 feet or so from the east property line to Pennsylvania Avenue, that will not be a 60-foot right-of-way. That's the current statutory right-of-way. No additional right-of-way has been acquired at this time.
So that's the additional 15 feet in lots 21 through 23.
Correct. So in order to ensure that we had the 60-foot right-of-way for the entire length of the property, you see that jog there, to keep the, that's, instead of acquiring additional right-of-way off the property from the adjacent property owners, all the right-of-way will come from the current property owner, Shaz.
So does that leave 16 and a half foot of the statutory right of way undeveloped?
No. So that utilizes all of the statutory right-of-way and the additional right-of-way to make up the difference between the 33-foot and the 60-foot. That all came from the north, as opposed to coming from both sides of the center line.
What happened east of there?
It was the city.
I know the city's gonna take care of it, but it's jogged to the north, and the road's not east of there, right?
Well, there is roadway.
I know there's a road, but it's not jogged to the north.
Well, but
Well,
if you measured from the south boundary of this road that's in the development, north 33 foot,
That's
that
what,
would be the statutory right of way.
and that's what,
So that's how much will continue in a straight line on across. But because we require additional right of way on a road development, they're giving us that right of way on the north side.
so future right-of-way for that remaining 700 or so feet could be acquired solely from the north or from both sides.
So the guy that has the house that would be 7 feet, if we just keep everything to the north, it would actually be 37 feet. Because we're gonna take.
We're gonna stay on the statutory right of way. So if he's 7 feet from that statutory right of way, that's how far he'll be. Now, that's where I had hoped the city and people would get together, the landowners there get together and buy some right of way, move some right of way and move, actually make a job. But that hasn't happened. There is a statutory right of way. Well, that was the thing that I hadn't added up right, was to make sure we were getting the section line set back and that wasn't gonna mess up our building line.
Yep, they've already accounted for that within the development, yes, sir.
Okay.
So there's two-way stop going north and south across the section line, is that right? The section line itself is a
But we haven't gotten into the traffic control signage. That's typically final plat stage. Preliminary plat is more layout.
yeah, I guess my question is it normal to develop a neighborhood across the section line like that? And
Similar to 8th Street out in Windermere.
It's not unusual.
Yeah, not unusual. It won't be unusual someplace in here to say, we need a stop sign here
right,
versus.
that's what I was getting at.
I guess on the west side, we probably don't need one.
Right.
Because there's not gonna be any traffic coming from the west for a long time. But as you get farther east, you might wanna throw one in there. Well, and the main road coming down across there, that will probably need some speed breaks.
And again, that typically comes in the final plat stage when we sit down and actually have the plans before us and can scrutinize
And I understand that detail, but we've been down that road where we've approved all this stuff, and then we should have talked about it, and we didn't, and so now we can't make a change in the final plat because we've gone too far. So I'm just
The
trying to,
final plat will come before you again.
yeah, no, I get that,
Okay, I just.
but to me, it's unusual to see it across the section line, and then the road, the neighborhood goes through the section line, and, you know, so I'm just asking the question because I don't fully know.
That's something we will definitely keep in mind when we review that.
Is there any other questions, any questions?
We got everything squared away on the west side of the old park, right? It's all.
Yeah.
That's the only question.
Are there any public comments?
Megan Hill, I live at 1470 Billy P. Drive in Norman. My land is right on the west side where 40th stubs out. I believe I heard earlier the plan is only to go to the east right now on 40th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how does, if 40th needs to be developed to the west, how does that come about?
If you sell to a developer.
That's the only way. So later on, we can't come back and say, okay, we're going to open up 40th to the west.
Yeah, there'd
Okay.
have to be somebody come in.
Somebody would have to
That's
sell
not
property.
been-
I just wanted to be sure, but I hadn't heard that.
There's
in the
no
last
reason
meeting.
for that to happen unless.
I gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. So then my question would be, because the pond, the detention pond will actually first come to my land and then it'll go to our family land. But where that road stubs out, what are we doing at that point to make sure everybody knows to not continue driving? Because that's going to be rough for them hitting a dirt pit. But I just didn't know if that gets put into the plan right now, whether there's barriers or what that looks like, just to be sure that
Is that fenced right now? Is there?
it is a very old barbed wire fence that will not retain anything. I think it's a wood post, that, honestly, with quite a few holes. So it is not secure by any means.
Okay.
Again, typically during the final plat phase, that's when we'll actually get the paving plans, and they will include for any of the stubs, a barrier gate, or excuse me, a crash barrier, reflective panels put in the ground, making it very clear, like the road stops here.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I'll just throw out, we probably, as we look at that, we probably ought to look at putting a turnaround there to some degree, just so we don't get people backing up to the intersection to turn around. Would probably be more serviceable to make a turnaround there that would be serve as access to your park. Maybe put parking on the north side, and that'd be how you turned around, just as you get ready to design it.
Question about that. Did Windermere, we required them because it was a park, we required them to have parking. This park does not have parking.
You know, we had them pull off onto their park and develop the parking. And
Yeah.
that might just be
So
something to note is that, well, go ahead.
the park at Windermere is an actual public park, right?
Well,
you're talking about that central.
It's
Wait,
not,
wait,
because the city manager told me the city
You're-
employees couldn't pick up the trash there because it's private, so.
Please let me correct myself. It is a park with an actual playground and equipment and things of that nature. This will be an improvement to the common area to include some amenities, but not to the extent of being a formal park.
By installing a playground and park benches. What's the difference between the playground and park benches at Windermere and by installing, obligation by installing a playground and park benches? What's the difference?
Can I go ahead and speak to that? So in our subdivision regulations right now, we only have that 3.5% that's required for parkland for that development. And we don't have any,
Formal direction.
parking requirements for HOA parks. What happened with Windermere Park is it got left out of that phase one final plat, so it was never final platted. Then they started coming in and building that park, and we're like, oh, wait, you never final platted that. So when that final plat just for the park came in, that's when planning commission said, hey, because of this location and it's surrounded on all sides by streets and traffic, where this is a little bit different, plus our regulation doesn't have that parking requirement for HOA parkland dedication. It was a little bit different. So we don't have that in our subdivision regulations right now.
Okay.
But
Well, I think with needing a turnaround there and that being a crash gate, I'd like to see that. And we made Windermere do it.
At this stage, we don't have to address that because this is just preliminary plat. But you might note that for a future
Noted.
contest, because I mean, it would suffice as a way to make that a turnaround and not impose any additional cost on the developer. Yes,
Charles Willis,
Charles.
3921 South Main.
Yeah, Charles.
Can I get an explanation of what you guys are talking about on the right of way and the jog and those things?
Okay.
And if it, and how it's going to affect my
You'll see
property?
those.
The section line,
This is where their property ends, and that, your house is over here, right? Yeah, right here?
This
Yeah, so the jog happens, and the property ends right there. So that's what this is.
Okay, so you're not talking about like moving, because you're saying you're gonna take it from the north.
well,
We're
that's all
talking about
within
all
the
the
development.
This
All
is
the
just
development.
within their property ownership.
Okay, not
Not
on the
outside of
extension of.
Correct.
Okay.
Which was my question about, we've already jogged it, but the road doesn't jog here, so.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Anything, Carl?
I'm good.
Any further public comment? This time, I'll make a motion that we recommend approval of the revised preliminary plat of Blue Ridge Estates, which will now include the northern segment, along with the old segment that we just rezoned, as laid out. I'll note that this approval, in my opinion, recognizes the section line road existing, and my discussion with county commissioner and my reading of their resolution requires us to accept and approve the opening of the road, which is a little strange. That's not a normal thing that the planning commission would do, but that's the way they said it. And it's my opinion that once we decide that we want to approve this, we should open that road we should make their resolution effective by making our recommendation and ask that our city council approve our act. And that way, everybody's gonna have said yes. If we don't do that, somewhere in there, I think there's a hole. So, I don't think there's a big issue with the order we do it. Did you, Jeff? If I'm right, do we need to do the opening first, or can we just approve the preliminary plat and then do our opening?
You can do it all together if you want.
The one's weird enough, I'd rather do it
Well,
myself.
I understand what you're trying to get at. You're trying to tie up a potential chink in the way the county commissioners approved it.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine to do that. I'm not sure I agree with you. It's legally required, but I think it's a smart thing to do as far as, tying up a potential hole.
I kind of agree with that because they gave the power to somebody that shouldn't really, isn't
I'm
this?
not sure they had the authority to delegate that power. But
Well,
but
yeah,
that's okay.
It's a lot better to cure it than it is to not.
And I don't disagree with you about that. I
So,
think that's,
but do you think we need to do that first, or can we just adopt this and then do it?
I would adopt this first. And then,
Well, I made that motion, that's why,
Yeah.
why it's easier. So recognizing that next act is necessary to make my motion effective, I so move. And that'll be to approve the preliminary plan. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify with an upraised hand. Be unanimously approved. At this time, in order to comply with the provisions of the county commissioner resolution, opening the section line road along, it would be our Southwest 40th Street. I make a motion that we approve the county commissioners act of the resolution opening this road subject to the approval of the Newcastle Planning Commission. I think that's all I need to say. And what we're doing, the way they worded their resolution was subject to the approval of the Newcastle Planning Commission, we open the section line.
Haven't we done that by just approving them?
No.
Well, that's what he was asking. One attorney said yes and one attorney said no. We're gonna do it both ways.
Cover all the bases.
Was that your motion? I will
You
second.
did it pretty well.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend or to approve the act of the county commissioners and approve the act of the county commissioners in opening the section line road. All in favor, signify with an upraised hand. Be unanimously approved. And we'll ask the city council to approve our act.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Item number 11 is discussion and possible action on the preliminary plat of Whispering Pines. Oh,
Sorry?
I'm sorry.
10 and 11 got
10 and
continued.
11 are both continued. Item 12 is discussion and possible action on deviation from facade requirements as described in the Newcastle Code of Ordinances, Chapter 154, Planning and Zoning, Section 154.101, exterior building material and facade requirements in commercial and industrial zoning districts. This is for Scooters Coffee / Castle Medcalf LLC, located at 376 North Main Street, Newcastle, Oklahoma.
Good evening, Kevin Hagerberg, Development Services Coordinator. So as stated there, this is for a deviation of facade for Scooters on Northeast 2nd. They came in early 2023 to discuss the development of that land that is there. Through that time and our subsequent meetings, we discussed the regulations within commercial districts, 80% facade requirement on each elevation. And as you see in your packet there, there's also a highlight of the plans that show that they did plan for stucco within the plans. Those were the approved plans, and the building progressed under that assumption. Late December, through driving around the city, our code inspectors identified that there was hardy board being placed on the side of the building. As many of us know, hardy board is not a typical backing for any type of stucco. We approached the job site managers, and there was an internal change order to the plans, changing from the approved stucco to hardy board. Reached out, again, like I said, that was an internal kind of change order. They did not consult the city, where that they needed to. Somehow there must have been some communication lost there regarding the 8% facade requirement. However, in discussion with them and looking at surrounding scooters in the area, this is not an uncommon design that they do present to their clients in development. Again, in your packet and on the screen, you'll notice that the hardy board for about 3/4 of the building is common. So their design that they did do the change order to aligns with their theme development, which, as you gentlemen know, from early in 23, we also did another deviation of facade that approved a themed country-esque facade deviation to the Mason requirement. The applicant's representative is present. If you have any questions, city staff supports and recommends approval of this deviation.
This is the type of deviation or type of circumstance that we put that provision in for when we put it in. So I'm not surprised we're seeing it. I don't really have a problem with it. The one thing I do know that I think the deviation should be limited to this use and not continue on. I mean, the prior, I can't remember the name. What was the name of it? Country store. It was the country store facade.
General store?
Was it General Store? Is that what
That's
it's
Luigi's
called?
now?
It's Luigi's now, yeah. And we still have the same facade for Luigi's. And Luigi's doesn't really fit the country store facade as much, but that's what was there. And so I'm going to suggest that we approve this subject to it's limited to this use.
Define use for me, Gordon, so I understand what you mean by that.
This business purpose, scooters. While it is a scooter.
Drive-through restaurant, a drive-through food service.
No, he's saying if it becomes Sniffle Fritz popsicle stand, scooters is the look for this building and they can change it.
Yeah. The reason.
Whoever buys it next can't.
What if the next person still sells coffee?
Well, that's what he's saying.
It's not a scooter.
But it's the same use.
It is the same use.
That's why.
That's where I went with that.
Yeah. I'm talking about, we're approving it for scooters for their.
How do you keep track of that?
We do have within the commercially zoned districts, we do have the ordinances that explain noncompliance. So if they have more than 3 permits that exceed the market value of the property, I might be messing up those values, but it does require them to come to compliance. So say Scooters leaves, this is no longer the next business's brand, and we need them to come to compliance with 80% facade elevation, 80% mason per facade, per elevation rather. We could pursue that. And I think there might even be a clause in there that might say use, or there might be a couple of different lines in there that outline what you're saying, Mr. Harness, but to track it per change of hands and looking at use might be a little bit difficult to look after.
I would like to kind of ask a question on and clarify that. So once it goes through and you allow this deviation of facade for that masonry in the commercial and industrial districts, there's nothing in our ordinance right now. I mean, if I'm seeking legal counsel, can we legally put a stipulation on that building once we approve that deviation for a facade and just tie it only to scooters? Like, also, what if it's another coffee shop or something like that, and they come in, is it only tied to that scooter theme, or is this, and that's how we're allowing it, the deviation. But if they go away, and like Kevin said, are it doesn't actually become non-conforming because scooter leaves. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it wouldn't be non-complying per se, because all they'd have to do is change the signs, and that wouldn't cost enough to drive it into having to be brought to our code. But if we approve it for the applicant for a facade utilized by scooters as per these examples, and they sell it, and the hot dog stand wants to come in, they'll have to come into compliance. And that's because if scooters goes out and all the exterior except the sign stays the same, it'll look like a scooter's. And what we're trying to say here is because scooters is desirable and has a unique exterior, it justifies us deviating from our facade requirement. And I'm happy to do it, but for the next one, I don't know that I am. And the next one, the hot dog stand could come in with some appropriate exterior facade application and say, this is really going to fit my hot dog because all I've got to do is put a different color scheme here and it looks like a hot dog and that's what I want to do. And if it looks good, we'd probably say yes. But I think what they're asking us to do is approve something unique to them so they don't have to meet our
Yeah, that's what I was,
80% requirement.
and they had the discussion about it and then decided we didn't want to worry about that and then make the change midstream and we're having to approve change they've already put in place.
And we've got an example of what happens when we approve the country store, which was fine. But it's still there and it doesn't have anything to do with country store now. And I'm just saying, as we change these facade requirements.
Gets sticky, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of think, thinking through it, I think Kevin's right. I think if they came in, say scooters leave, and we've had several infill projects where we've had to go, oh, your parking lot's not requiring up to our standards or the facades aren't, you have a metal building and you want to change the use. Maybe that's what we look at that time.
So what's the trigger?
So if we get a infill, say it is Joe's Hot Dogs that comes in and says, hey, Scooter's gone, we're gonna buy this building, but we want to add customer seating. Now there's where it gets sticky if they're not changing anything or expanding the footprint.
That's right.
That's where
We've gone round and round on this one. I believe it's 3 permits, totaling greater than 25% of the assessed value of the property.
That's quite a bit.
This is a rather small structure, so it couldn't be, potentially for this particular property. So it is a value-based, trigger.
Well, I'm always hesitant to approve somebody's mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, this was a mistake.
I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was intentional. They can show us 3 other buildings that they've done the exact same way. I think they intentionally said, yeah, we'll do it, and then did what they wanted to do, and then came and asked for forgiveness because it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, and they've already got it built. What are we going to tell them? They got to tear it down?
Well, there's the question.
There's my rant. I'm sorry.
There's the question, right?
I can speak on that part. I'm
Come forward and identify.
Matt Smith. I'm the construction manager. I understand what that it looks like that. I built 10 of these. They're all the hardy 4x8 sheets and then the lap siding. A lot of scooters plans, they have a disconnect with their architect, and once the plans are done, we don't hear from the architect again. We didn't know about the 80% requirement. The architect, I'm sure, did. We didn't know about the 80% requirement. I talked to the owner. I said, you want to do, hardy like normal, or do you want to do the stucco, which we've had problems with on their older stores? And yeah, that's what happened. He said, go with the hardy like we normally do. And so.
Well, what did the engineer or the architect's plan show?
It does show stucco. But since I've done so many of them and the owner said, do it like we normally do it, that's how I proceed. And the stucco plans, they want it to look like lap siding and look like 4x8 sheets. the 4x8 actual sheets, it's gonna look very similar either way. The 4x8 sheets are gonna hold up a lot better, and it all looks cleaner because it's not
A mold of.
it's not a person putting the line.
Right.
Well, as I said, I think it's an application for a unique look, and I'm willing to approve it for a unique look. I just don't want it to be perpetual, and I think we can.
And I think whatever we do, we need to, especially with the growth and with the 2040 plan we just approved and with the HTOs coming and they have unique looking buildings and all that kind of stuff, that whatever we do here is something that we are able to do consistently for,
That's my deal, 'cause we
for
just
the
did the city plan
Chick-fil-A's
that
and the
said don't deviate from
HTOs
stuff
and
like
the people that have their unique style when they come in. I don't know if Chick-fil-A's coming. I don't know. That's not what I meant, but there are some that we've heard, yes, they are coming. And they have unique looking buildings and they're going to ask for the same thing. So whatever we do, we just need to make sure it's something that we're willing to do for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's the thing. We're going to establish a precedent here of what we're going to do.
We already did.
You think so?
We did with the country store, didn't we?
Well,
And then Carrie McFell.
Kerry came in and requested the deviations, but we didn't have the master plan in place.
And
And
then
these
also,
regs hadn't been
well, we had
modified.
a master plan. I just had the
Well,
old
but
one,
not the new one. That
Mr. Wilson.
They don't say.
essentially said don't deviate from the regulation.
Well, no, our ordinance, when we put that in, we put this in to allow just this. And the Gary's deal, if you come in with something other than a Quonset building, we can approve it. Well, we could approve a Quonset building if we wanted.
That's the arch building.
Oh.
Put on farmland. That's
Oh.
terrible.
But
Age to show.
but that's where that came from when we put it in. And we knew there'd be people that had a unique look that they were looking for, that it was hard to cover a provision that said 80% except where it's a unique look or something. And rather than do that, we said, set an absolute that we can enforce and then look at everything else. And that's all I'm saying now is we weren't smart enough to do it right before. And we didn't say we're improving it for the country store, but we aren't going to improve it for the next 4 tenants. And that's what I'm saying here. I just think we need to say we're approving it for Scooter's coffee service use as a Scooter's coffee. And any deviation from that will require the building be brought into compliance. The fact is, this is a unique enough building that's small enough. If you were going to put a new business there, they'd probably tear it down and put a new one up anyway. But if somebody buys this building and wants to use that exterior, and it could come in and show us that it looked appropriate. I mean, I really don't think that exterior would look appropriate for a clothing store, nor do I think the building would work. But if somebody came in and said, yeah, I bought this and so I can say I've got a building I can sell, I want to say it's going to be a clothing store, prove my exterior, I probably would be very willing to do that, because we get to look at it. It is what I'm proposing we approve it, so we get to look at it.
Well, I don't dislike the look. I have no problem with that. It's just kind of what he said. It feels like, oops,
Well, I think
somebody messed up, and let's just,
yeah.
approve
Well, we
the
wouldn't have
mistake.
seen it if you would have stuck with the.
Sure, it was a mistake.
Yeah.
It wasn't intentional, is
But-
what I was saying.
Yeah. But because they made that mistake, we get to look at it and say we want to approve a facade variation, and they could have come to us. And put
The
it
other
right
thing
where
to
we are
note
before.
is the stucco plans. It's going to look almost exactly the same just in my opinion, a little bit worse, than the hardy panels. Paint's the same color. You know, we rake the stucco to make it look like lap.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been to the scooters, they were giving away coffee.
Like I said, I don't just like the look. And, you know, it improves the look of Main Street compared to some other businesses on Main Street, for sure. I get that. What's the mechanism then to manage it going forward? Like,
Absolutely. I think
that's my biggest thing.
Now, what we heard is there had to be 25% change for that to occur?
Of value.
Is that what I heard?
25% of the structure's value. If you have 3 permits.
What's that building, 400?
Oh, a little over 3.
Oh, not too far off. Okay, so there you go.
So
$70,000 a year,
$100,000
try to change. That helps me understand, right?
Yeah.
When does it get triggered if a building gets bought by somebody and you make them update the ADA compliance? How does that get triggered? I've done a lot of jobs where
one that's ADA compliant, aren't you?
yes, but I've done a lot of remodels where we've had to do a lot of ADA.
No, I understand. I'm not the right guy to ask. There's much more important people that can answer that question for you.
Usually change in use and occupancy and several different factors.
So similar in this situation, change of occupancy could trigger you to make
that's
sure
what
it
Kevin was
meets all
saying
the
is
code.
that,
Right.
you know,
I mean,
the
you go to
change in use.
coffee kitchen or whatever, isn't gonna fit a hot dog kitchen probably. So they're probably gonna have 70 grand worth of renovation.
And that makes me feel better, so I understand
Kitchen.
what we're doing, because I'm not opposed to approving this, but I am very opposed to fixing everybody's autos.
Right.
Well, if we approve it for the scooter's use and their demonstrated facade as shown, but no other use, so that when they try to sell it, if that use isn't approved, can we do that and then that'd bring it back for the next use?
I think you can.
Does it make it harder to sell and make it sit there?
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't buy it because,
Oops.
I'm saying you get dormant
I
buildings
see
sitting on the
stucco
lot.
in your future, Will.
You looking to buy a coffee shop?
No, I'm saying you get dormant buildings sitting on the
Yeah,
side
that's
of
a
the
good point.
road because nobody will buy it, because the building's only 300 grand to buy, but I got another 250 to renovate.
If Scooters doesn't work there, the person that's gonna buy that corner is gonna tear that down and build their fancy building and come in here and ask us for a facade deviation.
I think so.
For a term of the sale.
Yeah, yeah.
We need you to go back to planning commission and see if for this new hot dog use, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Will you accept that deviation for this use too?
Yeah, that'll end up, it'd be a condition of
I mean, that's
sale.
how that's how we did, that's how we were doing the
I'm
marijuana
suggesting
stores.
the owner.
Oh,
They were trying to sell a building, but it was
I
not a
don't think we-
condition of,
No, no.
it wasn't gonna be approved.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the deviation and facade to the Hardy Board for the applicant's application for the use as a Scooter's coffee shop as depicted in the illustrations given for their company facade.
With it? I'll second.
Is there any public comment on this? No? So, all in favor? Unanimously passed. Discussion of possible action on amendment to chapter 154, planning and zoning, section 154.093, off-street parking, loading and access regulations. H, access. 4, access to streets. A, maximum number of curb cuts, which will allow additional driveways for large estate lots.
Good evening, Kevin Hageberg, Development Service Coordinator. Actually on that last one, just want to note for clarification, it's 20% of the improvement values. So in some instances, that could be a very small number. And that's what for the non-conforming. So as stated, this amendment is coming forward from some instances that we've had with the Board of Adjustment. So currently, if you want 2 driveways on any interior lot, it requires a circular drive. And in many instances, that's not feasible for either, we don't approve or deny permits based on how much it costs the citizen. However, it does incur a significant cost to pave around a circular driveways in many instances.
Yeah, I know.
And most recently, it would have required taking out some vegetation or old growth.
Less to mow.
Less to mow too. So this one kind of makes it opens it up for those larger lots of estates to have multiple drives without that circular drive requirement. This amendment is kind of caged by other requirements within the ordinances, specifically Table 6, which I believe I included in there. And I might even have it here.
Yeah, I never saw that in the package.
Okay, I apologize. It is behind you though. There is a driveway separation requirement. You're not going to be able to have multiple or like more than 2, 3, 4, 5 driveways on there because you are limited A by number. And then B, this table here prevents you from preventing your neighbor from having a driveway.
Is this table in this document?
I apologize, it is not.
Okay.
And as noted, it's only allowed in the large lot E1, E2, and 3, not in RF1. So you're not going to see RF1 neighborhoods having those independent drives.
So it's a minimum of 60 feet separation, or is that 50? I can't see from here.
150, 60, 60, 150, 60, 60.
So
Yeah, when you're really talking about local streets, it's in the Oaks.
Yeah, in the Oaks, on Oak Hollow, he wanted to build a driveway to his back to his shop.
Okay.
Instead of being able to, he was told he had to build a circle driveway. So he's not anymore.
Well, and the
We didn't
5/8
accept it.
lots,
Yeah.
basically, where we got 5/8 acre lots and putting the shop
The
in the
hardship
back.
was the circle.
So if I do a circle drive, I can put it as close as I want.
Second. If
If I build a circle drive, I can put those 2 streets as close as I want. Is that correct?
The separation of the 2 driveways.
Right.
The 2 entrances.
Good question.
Well, I know the
So-
answer. What's your answer?
Well, this would tell me no, but
But that is not for circle drives, correct?
Right.
Is that for circle drives?
no, that's for drives.
Okay. Mine's about 10 feet apart. So. But it's circle drive.
Well, if you're
Anyway, I think it's an interesting conversation. I'm sure y'all got into it. Will, you guys got anything more you want to talk about the Board of Adjustment and how this relates?
The only question I had was the limit of the number that you could do, and this says 2. So, and the fact that they can do it without requiring circular drive is a benefit. In certain environments, it was beneficial. Like we allowed an exception because the hardship, as were specified by the Board of Adjustment, was the circle drive requirement. That he'd have to spend $10,000 to tie it together, cut out a 200-year-old tree, just to meet the requirements to have his drive to his shop.
Okay.
My other concern is, I'm actually the neighbor of the guy that came to the Board of Adjustments. Our shops are both on the same side so mine's on the south side of my property, his is on the north side. If he builds off the road and he builds his concrete drive first, then I can't build mine because mine won't be 60 feet from his. So it's just, I better call the
Those
concrete
numbers
guy
didn't
today.
change.
Like,
No,
and so
those have not
that's my concern.
It is a
that
valid concern.
I mean, I understand the reasoning for not wanting driveway. But in neighborhoods like mine, and the fact that I know exactly who will talk to at the Board of Adjustments, that would be my concern for other neighbors as well going forward.
Yes.
And I think valid point, absolutely. So in that discussion, Mr. Covey pointed out, hey, we cannot have this. I think he said 30 feet off the property line. That may prohibit yours a little bit, but so that would require to maintain that 60-foot separation. Yours would have to be at least 30 feet off.
So 30 feet. He has to be 30 feet off of his. I have to be 30 feet off of mine, and so that would give us the 60 feet.
In your specific instance, it did work.
Okay.
Say that again. This new road has to be 30 feet off of the property line?
Per the Board of Adjustment, it was in that one instance. So
Oh.
we would definitely have to look at each
'Cause there's
driveway.
lots of driveways that are sitting right
Yeah.
next to the property
But
line.
it had to do in
Right.
this specific instance.
Yeah.
His shop is
Okay.
same
Right.
side.
Mhm.
So he had to be 30. So if he wanted to put one in, they're separated at 60.
Yeah.
In this instance, it did work by these numbers.
So we would definitely have to look at driveways holistically at this point. We couldn't just, or the neighboring properties, we couldn't just look at the singular property with the future
Yeah, we're
driveway
gonna have to look
approvals.
at it a little harder in
Yes.
that way.
Well, so do we need to fix this so that we can recognize that the guy built his shop 10 feet off or 20 feet off the property line, and his garage door lines up a foot inside his wall.
Mhm.
So he wants his drive 21 foot rather than 30 foot. So do we need to adjust that 60-foot requirement and go ahead and recognize that those two shop drives ought to be closer together, or ought to be allowed to be closer?
How many, I mean, it still goes back to how many cuts do you want in a certain distance? That's the other part of that conversation.
Well, but if you're gonna have 4 cuts in 300 feet,
Okay.
do you care if 2 of them are 20 foot apart or 2 of them are 60 feet apart?
Well, it probably depends on whether, on the section line road, it might be relevant.
It may, but here's what they're gonna drive to their shops anyways. The whole
No,
point
I
of
understand.
like regulations and stuff is to make it safer, make the city nicer, all that kind of stuff. They're driving to their shops anyway, so they're either gonna have a dirt trail
Yep.
with mud, with ruts, and they're pulling off out of their grass onto the road with their trailers and their boats and all that kind of stuff, or we let them put the driveways closer together and it's safer and it looks nicer. So I'm not saying I want driveways every 60 feet or every 30 feet or whatever. Like, I completely get that, but the other side of that is they're doing it anyways and they're just driving in the grass. So, and I live on he's not the only one. It's that whole neighborhood and area, and there's people that have 2 driveways already, and they have gravel driveways still in there that go up to the road and stuff. So, and they're driving through their yard to get to their shop in the back.
So my only question is, does this amendment need to address adjacent property owners? Or do we care?
Yeah, I think it does. I think we need to look at what's the setback requirement for their shop. And practically, if we put shops that close to the property line with a reasonable garage door placement in the shop, what's the practical distance between those 2 driveways?
E3 is 5 feet for accessory buildings.
There you
So-
go, baby. You're talking about 10 feet apart, right?
Yeah, so you're talking almost common single, 2 cuts, but they're gonna be like a single pullout, but they're low traffic. So is that bad? I think it's a better deal to have them, 2 of them close together.
So is this, are we chasing one property owner with this thought process? Are we?
No, there's been more than one. That was the latest.
For the
We've seen it.
No, it's
We've
to
seen it
prevent it
several
from going to
times.
the POA in the future.
I think we ran into one property owner that was told how to properly take care of this, and we're sitting here.
Well, no, we've done this more than once at
Oh,
the
yeah.
Board of
Oh,
Adjustment.
okay. Well, I meant to get it changed. Or
Well,
did they?
The
My
Board of
question is-
Adjustment pushed it.
Okay.
My question is this amendment talking about one property owner and the spacing on their own property? Because that's what I heard
Right.
when we
That is
started this
correct.
conversation.
That's
That
the way
is
I
correct.
read this.
Yes.
But after the dialogue continues, then we end up talking about neighbors and how that affects that.
Mhm.
Well, the 60-foot deal and the way the Board of Adjustment did it was some didn't want to do it and some wanted to do it. But if we let this guy have his, what were we going to do about the other guy?
But that's not up there.
Right.
All that dialogue is not up there.
But we worked all that out, and that gets into trying to comply with this 60-foot requirement. And that's where we're
ma'am.
jumping in here and saying, maybe we need to fix the 60-foot requirement because of the practical aspects of what we've seen in the past. But, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yes, it applies to one single property, and so staff's job, when somebody comes in for a building permit and they say, you got a vacant lot next to you, they come in and they look at it and say, hey, where can we put our shop, what's the setback, where do we need to put our house? We were thinking about doing an additional driveway, that's when we would tell them, you know, this property has a driveway at this location, you need to meet this 60-foot separation. And so then that would tell them where they have to put their additional
Which is pretty
driveway.
rough.
And that can be, if there's already a driveway,
If they're sitting 5
adjacent,
foot off the property
if
line.
they're sitting 5 foot off that property line, but is it it's 5 feet for the side setback in the,
For accessory buildings.
for accessory?
E3.
E3 only, though.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that comes from.
Well, whether it's 5 foot or 10, it's still pretty rough because 60 foot's a long way.
Yeah, it's pretty bad to end up, if you want
I'm
to.
sorry, Gordon, you can't have a shop because you just gonna have to have that dirt road, right? Because we're not gonna let you put in pavement down.
Well, I can have the shop, I've just got to enter over here on that side of my property and drive all
So,
across the front.
There's quite a bit to this.
Let's fix that part of this. Think we can?
We can take a look.
That's what I'd say. Let's take a look and see if we can make it practical with what we know is going to get built. Because that's what we're trying to accommodate. Okay?
Yeah, I don't know how to fix the neighbors thing. That sounds like lots of fun, sir.
Can we just continue this?
Yes. That's fine. We haven't had any, and again, it's at the request of the BOA. We haven't had any recent ones that this is pressing for, so to get ahead of future ones.
I'll make a motion to continue this discussion and ask Kevin to work on it some more to our next regular scheduled meeting. All in favor? Unanimously passed. Hold up your hand. Unanimously passed. Item 40, discussion possible action on amendment to chapter 92, health and sanitation nuisances, section 92.99 penalty, which will allow costs associated with administrative procedures to be recouped when the city must summarily abate non-compliant property.
Yes, so this might be a series of amendments that you potentially see in front of you. We are in the process of kind of refining our code enforcement processes. Newcastle historically has not taken action beyond a request for via a 10-day letter. Hey, you have 10 days to come in compliance. Next one is a certified mail. Hey, you have 10 days to come in compliance. Beyond that, our mechanisms to rectify or remediate those properties is very limited.
Can you not clean it up, put a lien on the place?
Yes, that is exactly what this amendment is for. So we do have that process to declare a nuisance, abate the property, and put a lien on the property if they don't pay within 30 days or 60 days in some instances. So this ordinance seeks to set a administrative fee for abatement processes. This is in addition to any abatement costs that might be gained, such as from a contracted lawn mowing company, boarding services, demolition company. So this puts time back, recoups costs that the city incurs from the research and making sure the process is done correctly, the lien filing fees, and the release of lien if they pay off the abatement costs. So it's an all-encompassing fee of the work that staff does, as well as what we owe to the county when we do place a lien on a property.
I'll be honest, I think it's probably needed. I have dealt with Oklahoma City on this, on some property that we had acquired tax sale and going through the mess of trying to get title to it. And in the meantime, a particularly little overzealous and nasty city employee kept
Called an inspector, sir. And Oklahoma City has several of them, sir. And they're not shy.
Sir, there were several of these sirs, and one in particular, who kept sending out mowers in between the time we were mowing it. And it was his decision that we weren't mowing it enough, of course, which is hard to argue with. And they ran up one heck of a bunch of bills.
That was my question as to what.
And that's the question I have. Is where's the limit come in? Because city being able to do anything they want, in my case, resulted in about $2,400 worth of cost over 2.25
I will say that the guidance from the city manager and the way that we will be doing code enforcement is very limited. We are sensitive of the kind of the historical context of Newcastle, that it's largely agricultural. We're not going to go around finding people. The abatement process is for extreme situations, but in those instances that do arise, we need a way to recoup those costs. We're not going to be abating every other 12-inch grass property in the city. It's for those repeat offenders that don't acknowledge the previous warnings.
I kind of thought we'd be okay out here for a few more years, but anyway, I thought I'd mouthful about that just because.
Well,
but it is.
That's being vindictive, and we don't need to be that.
No.
Sure.
No. So this is just finding. This is not you going out there and mowing, right?
Correct, just the administrative fee. So this is not the contracted mowing service fees. Those will, if we contract them, three businesses, we pick the best offer of those three.
So that's in place already. Have you had?
That's a statute. We have not.
We haven't go mow anywhere.
Say again?
Have we mowed here in Newcastle?
Not recently, no.
They should mow my neighbor. Not the same.
You go get them, boy. Hey, I got a question for you. Gray water discharge.
Yeah.
Oh, what a good topic. So, if you use your aerobic system and you spray, and there's a spacing requirement, and it runs down the hill on my place, what are we going to do?
I'd probably call the DEQ and see what they tell me to do.
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think gray water is relevant, especially in these aerobic systems.
Well, that's one of the concerns we had way back when.
Well, my point is it needs to be in here just because of what I'm agreeing with you is what I'm trying to say. This gray water is a real thing.
That's why I highlight the septic density on all of our new developments.
Yeah, it's a real thing. So in Oklahoma City, just so you know, because I found out last week, and it's not that for the whole state, the separation between the area that can be sprayed with an aerobic system is 25 feet away from anybody else's property. Wow. So now the state requirement is less, but Oklahoma City is 25 feet away from anybody else's property.
Most aerobic systems are not maintained properly, and they're literally spraying
everywhere.
Untreated feces all over.
Did we just approve? Some petition that allows that?
Anyway, so we need that.
Which is why I highlighted.
Yeah. Well,
I found one last week that was 12 feet off my property line.
The location of it.
Not where it's spraying, the head.
Oh.
Now, if they're well maintained,
he's spraying 10 feet on top of our property.
Yeah. But
it was
on top of the watering well, no less.
That's handy.
Sorry, I get off track.
What's the state separation?
Huh?
What's the state of?
I don't remember what it seems like. It was 10.
I don't know what the separation
it's
is.
either 5 or 10 feet. I don't remember what it is.
Between the head?
I can find it. think it's out in my truck, but
Between the heads,
it's a
you're
whole
talking
lot
about?
less, but Oklahoma City's 25.
25 and a 50.
And that's a long way.
And that's,
We
that's
adopted a
from
real
property,
serious ordinance.
property line.
Yeah.
It says someone else's property.
Okay,
I mean, if you want to pull it from the code, it's there.
okay.
And I'll promise you, if you start setting it that ugly, you start talking about spacing and trying to set these aerobic systems on top of these in these subdivisions where these houses are a half acre. They will have to be very good at setting that just in the right spot. It'll be exactly where Mama doesn't want it. That was where it'll be.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you remember we did all that work on septic
I know,
aerobics,
we talked
and they
about
just- Well, we passed it. We had some pretty good regs, and then they did away with it. Without us.
Well, they're trying to, they've got to get some septic systems in. That's the whole long thing.
Any further discussion? Any public comment? Anybody want to make a motion?
Jared?
What item is this?
Item 14.
14? You sure?
Yeah. This is the abatement.
Oh, I'll make a motion to approve item 14 on the agenda.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion second to approve item 14, amendment to chapter 92, health and sanitation. All in favor, signify with that raised hand. Be unanimously passed. Item 15, discussion possible action on amendment to chapter 154, planning and zoning, section 154.131, rezoning and amendment, application and review procedures, section B, fee schedule, which increases zoning and amendment fees, as well as adding a publication cost for public notices.
All right. So this ordinance amendment deals with basically our rezoning fee schedule. Currently, what you have in your packet is what you see highlighted, and then what is struck out is the amendment. So right now, the way it stands is that, we pay for the publication and we pay for the mailing of all the notices that have to go out to the 300-foot radius of whoever is contained in that property notification. We pay for the mailing, we pay for the publication and papers. Publication notices can be very different. You can have large legals that take up quite a bit of space, smaller legals that don't take up that much. So then it's not equitable for each applicant. So what we've done is come in and let me back up too. Our fee schedule has not been updated since 2006. So that's the last time that anything was done with the fee schedule.
It's a bargain. Is that what you're saying?
It's quite a bargain. The time that staff spends on processing the applications, let alone the mailing and the publication fee, but just the processing and writing staff reports, going back and forth with applicants to try to make whether it's a PUD or just a straight rezoning, and then producing the staff report and working with the applicant is quite a bit of time. And so we're not really recouping the fee, the time that we spend on these applications. So what we did is propose that we basically increase all of the rezoning fees in each category by $100. Mind you, again, the mailing, since you know how much postage has gone up in the past 18 years, and then of course the publication cost. So what we did was add the $100 to each category. It increased because it specifically called out saltwater disposal wells. We increased those by 1,000 and that renewal to 500. And then we are requiring the applicant to pay for their own legal notice in the paper. So city staff will.
So is that
All applications, right?
All applications.
So it's in addition to the $200.
So on, 15,
Well, it's highlighted right here. It says, in addition, each applicant must pay for the cost of publication. That's in,
Correct, so they would
That-
pay they'd pay, correct, right now, so if you're rezoning 0 to 5 acres, the cost is $200 plus your publication fee.
So just from a timing standpoint, what time do you know what it's gonna cost before, when are they gonna pay this? I mean, I'm trying to get this.
Right, so what I did was I talked to Mark Codner with, the Pacer, and, we got the way that he processes the lines, so the cost per publication is by word and by line, and then we put that location map in there as well for rezoning. So staff will use their, configuration to, calculate what their publication
So
cost
we'll know
is.
that day. At
So,
least a rough.
when we start this, we'll be able to take some examples and go, okay, PUD with a huge legal is gonna be, we'll figure it out in X amount. If it's a single lot, or like in Grigsby Edition where we just did that rezoning, that one lot, we'll figure that out and kind of a ballpark idea of what that will cost them. A lot of other cities, they pay for the publication cost. We didn't want to stop the process from, when I talked to Pacer and talked to Mark Codner, I wanted to be a little bit harder than this is that the applicant has to call and pay for their own publication, but that could potentially halt applications if they don't get it paid for. And I don't want to do that. So we came up with the idea that we'll go ahead and take their rezoning fee, and then this ordinance amendment lets them know that you're gonna have an additional payment that you will receive an invoice for. Hopefully at that time, we'll be able to give them a ballpark idea of how much that will cost.
And my final question is the notifications to the adjacent, property owners, that's based on a spacing and within 300 feet, so you have to figure out how many there's gonna be now. I assume that the applicants are finding the names. We're not doing it
No,
ourselves,
so,
right?
no, we
We
require
don't
them.
want in that game.
No,
We want
the
them
only-
bringing you the names. And when they
Correct.
bring you the name, it's just a pass-through cost for postage and.
Publication right now.
No, well, we're gonna mail these out, right?
Right.
As a city, so
Right.
they're gonna pay for the postage in this.
That's what their application fee will cover now.
Okay, fair
That's
enough.
what the increase of that. I do want to note that the ordinance as it stands right now, allowed administratively the city clerk to increase
Yeah, that's
the.
what I was gonna ask.
The city clerk could increase the, fees based on increase of postage and publication. We've never enacted that. And to clean it up, after talking with Camille, our city clerk, and, city attorney, we said, this is the right way to do it. And it changes it to where she can't automatically, but administratively increase fees. So, anyway, it cleans it up, and then it also codifies it into ordinance instead of just going through and saying, oh, we're just gonna increase it because postage has gone up. So this is comparable to other cities. I think that this will now, we won't be losing money. I don't want the city to lose money on these applications. And right now, is a lot of the case, given the time spent that staff spends on processing these applications, not even including the mailing. And you're correct, mailing, it's 300 feet and you have to have 15 property owners, or we have to go out 100-foot increments until we get to that 15 up to 1,000. A lot of times we provide that radius map, they bring us their
list.
Their certified.
You do not want to do
No,
the list.
they have to bring their certified ownership list. But we provide the radius map to ensure that they are doing it correctly. That we make sure that, okay, we've gone out 300 feet, there's 15 property owners, and that
figure
way,
it out.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a cross check. So that way we don't have somebody that goes, we've had that in the past. Well, this is my certified ownership list. And it's going back and tracking and then going, and so we do all of the radius maps, and they are responsible for, the certified ownership.
So for example, how much was the publication for that Grigsby notice? You have any idea?
I don't know. That's another thing, you know, the Pacer does us a service. They don't ask for payment up front. So like once a month.
You're 30 days behind.
Yeah,
30
yeah,
payments.
so I don't know. I would have to go and look and see what the proof of publication, what the cost of it was.
And that's a good point, and it's something that I can find out before we get to city council. I did do a little bit more
Probably
research.
$35 to $65. Isn't that about what probate notices cost? You probably haven't done one of
No, I
those.
haven't done a probate.
Well, every newspaper's gonna have different fees and rates.
Right.
No, they use
And
the
it depends
standard.
on the spacing too, what he's got allowed, if he does
Oh.
6 lines or if he does 10 lines,
Yeah.
you know, the spacing, so.
Well, if you get three different sizes, you'll have an idea.
Right.
Do we not have enough every month that there's like, he just sells us a certain amount of page space?
No, because he'll use that for somebody else. I mean,
Right, and
we're
that
not
was the
paying for it, somebody else.
Right,
pays
and that
for it.
was the point. We were like, we don't want to cause him to have wasted space
Blank
on
space
paper,
or,
and then somebody not pay their publication fee, and then it not get published. And on our side, we go, well, you have to go back. You have to be
right.
pushed up, you know, to the next planning commission meeting. So I think this was the most viable way for us to recoup costs, increase the fees based on mailing, postage, and then the publication fee too as well.
The question I had was, and I may be reading too much into it, where it says general circulation. Are we ever going to get into a situation where the Pacer isn't printed and it's only online? So
Even if it's online, it's still published.
it's still circulates
Mhm.
that.
That's why I think that we, and thank you to Jeff coming up with that language, because I have the Pacer in there, but what if the Pacer sells?
Yeah, that's right.
So
If the
that's
paper
where
goes
we
away,
go general
Yeah,
circulation.
general circulation that
within
does
the
cover
city.
that whole, even if it's only online. Okay.
Yeah.
Or Camille has told me if it does, we would have to publish it in the county seat and the
First, the-
Right.
the register,
Yeah.
Okay.
And just, I don't know that this is worth worrying about, but if we're going to administratively increase the fees, but have it improved in within 30 days, to be effective, why aren't we just recommending approval for the city council's approval within 30 days? Because if we start charging it and they don't approve it, do we give the money back? Just sounds like an order issue, but I'm not sure.
I think they were trying not to slow down the process of an applicant, but go get ratified as opposed to wait, you know, we have to increase the fees,
Oh.
let's go get that approved first, then we'll let you file your applications.
Okay,
Trying to move it along a little bit.
okay.
I know that most of those fees are the Pacer. Like,
Well,
they increased their rates for this year, and so they'll notify city council that Pacer's gone up, so.
Yeah,
That's what it's gonna
that
be.
makes sense.
Mhm.
But at
the
least
post
this
office
way,
is changing their rates about that often.
at least this way, if you're a citizen walking in, you're gonna know, obviously, these are blank fees, you know, it's hard set,
Yes,
but you're gonna
exactly.
know an example of what your cost
Correct.
to the Pacer's gonna be. It's not
Right.
just, we'll let you
We'll
know.
let you know. Yeah,
Right.
correct.
I make a motion, we recommend approval of the amendment of chapter 154 planning and zoning, section 154.131, subsection B, fee schedule, pursuant to the documents presented.
I'll second.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
All in favor, up raise hand, be unanimously approved.
Now we're ready.
Item 16, discussion possible action on amendment to chapter 152 flood damage prevention, section 152.42 permit procedures, A, permit requirements and fee status.
Okay, good evening, Kevin Hageberg again. This one, as stated there, so much like we're trying to look at our code enforcement processes, we're also looking at our floodplain management process as well. We have had a spike over the past 2 years because we're properly administering the program. There are tributaries within Newcastle, And most notably, recent projects down along South Harvey Street have, we've experienced several permits within the past few months for these project areas. Currently, there is no fee for processing a floodplain permit. And as I'm sure Mr. Evans knows and some of the others, when you process floodplain permits, there's interagency organization, OWRB, as well as other technical data that we need to review to make sure that these permits and the projects are violating any federal regulations. So all that research combined to either approve or deny any specific permit does take a substantial amount of time to make sure that we're doing that properly. As you'll see on the back of the report, fees are kind of all over the board in regards to processing floodplain permits across the metro, as well as 25 are actually in total. Could not find one. Did not receive any phone calls back, all the way up to.
It may not be floodplains in total.
Very well possible. So it is variable. We set ours at 100, and we did also include an additional requirement within our permitting process for floodplains. So we, again, as we're looking to amend our program here, FEMA has introduced what is known as the community rating system, which is if we fulfill certain requirements within our floodplain regulations, we can reduce the insurance policy for some holders within the community. So item or number 6 there is an additional recommended amendment. So requiring the elevation certificates, we should be requiring no rises.
You're asking the applicant to come up with a certificate? Is that what you're saying?
If applicable. So if you're putting in a structure, you need to present the elevation certificate.
Okay, so for him to do that, he's gonna have to go find the latest, greatest flood map, right, that the Corps put out, right? And then he's gonna have to have somebody look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Who can sign that document to give it to
an engineer or an
so
architect or a
PE
surveyor.
can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So that's gonna cost him some money.
Correct.
I'm guessing 200 to 500 probably at least. Probably more if he's doing very much study.
If you put that against a $3,000 monthly insurance policy, potentially, that $300 might be completely worth it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through the dollars, right?
Right.
I mean, there aren't gonna be very many $500 engineers signing that.
No, I can't get him to talk to me for less than $1,000, just so you know.
Yeah.
Of course, attorneys are in a whole another world, right? Yeah.
Hey, I'll let you know, I haven't got my engineering training. I can talk to you
Okay,
about
sorry,
that stuff.
I got off the track.
So we're all there. But no.
So you want $100 plus you want the certificate. Is that what that
In those given situations, right?
In those given situations would be,
If someone puts they want to put a house within a special flood hazard area.
next to Highway 9 back there where we're
but not like a driveway.
No.
Well, yeah.
So it has to be a
It's gonna be all
structure.
this, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Livable structure or any structure?
Any structure.
Yeah.
Livable structures and non-livable structures would incur different requirements for flood proofing and or open passage for water to come in and out. So there's different things that we got to look into as well for that. Hydrostatic pressure or something like that. I don't know none in here.
We used to do flood certificates all the time, but like we used to have to post in 2 months, that's all I did.
So I'm interested in what that certificate costs somebody. Do we have any idea what that costs? I mean, I just do numbers out. I don't know.
So the no rise could be
Because
substantial.
you're asking for this, right? On every
Yes.
one of these that we end up putting stuff in a 100-year flood, right? So they're having to do a clomer or loamer to put material in that floodplain, right?
Well, the no rise is certifying that whatever you're doing in the floodplain is not going to cause a rise in the base flood elevation upstream.
if you
And
put
honestly, the
anything there-
cost is going to be dependent on the consultant you use and
absolutely.
on the project you have. So I don't think,
Well, it's relevant
anybody can-
because somebody's going to spend it.
right, but I don't think anybody can give you like, here's how much it's going to cost, because it's going to depend on the consultant they use. It's going to depend on the project that they have.
So the certificate of no rise, that's pre.
Absolutely.
And then the elevation certificate is post-construction. That's when they actually go out and get the final measurement, the
For
final
structures.
elevation of the finished floor, right?
Yes,
Make sure it's above
A foot above floodplain,
floodplain.
right?
So they've got to do both of those. So that's two costs. It's the cost of getting the pre-certificate, and it's the cost of then having some surveyor or someone going out and getting a final elevation.
Well, that has to be done anywhere, but I don't know that that's in here. The last cost you're talking about, I don't know that that's in
Well, it says final FEMA elevation certificate and/or flood-proofing certificate.
Oh, okay.
So they got to do both. Is the way that I read it.
As applicable.
Is that
likely?
Yes.
Sounds
Well,
like-
if it's a structure, absolutely.
Kevin, what other cities require the no rise and the?
So I've been digging into Tulsa's. Tulsa is one of like 7 communities in the U.S. That are tier 1 in the community rating system. So
Means
they
they're
have
hard to deal with.
that and but they're if they're in the special flood hazard area, pay the
Lots of flood.
So
They get the biggest discount.
we should have been requiring the elevation certificate for structures anyways. This really just codifies that. And it's something that we haven't been doing because that's more or less a disservice to those people building that property.
But the real adder is the fact that you want that certificate of no rise. That's the outside cost that we don't really know what that.
We could amend that one. I could look at that and see if maybe that makes more. Obviously, if it's anything within, we can spell this out specifically for floodways for the no rise. I'm not overly concerned about the requirement for a no rise in the 100-year because the way that that's modeled is to accept a mountain there, right? So
It's been a while since I've worked it, but I think Oklahoma City requires a no-rise certificate.
Does Norman?
Floodplain.
I think they probably do. Can't imagine they would. This all is filtered through the federal regs. I mean, the whole thing is just this insurance program. In the floodplain. I don't want you to ever go in the floodplain. And so, it's designed to make it not very attractive because they don't want upstream and downstream flooding. So if you're gonna build something in the floodplain, then they put it on the builder to certify that there's not gonna be any impact not before you build it. And then once you build it, they want you to certify, yeah, we built it right.
Did it right.
Yeah, so these are not new requirements.
These are
They're not required, are already required in the federal regulations anyway. You're just saying, bring us a copy of it.
I didn't know the no rise was required in every city.
I think it is.
Okay.
Well,
Did
how
look
can you
at
put
that?
anything
I was
in the
getting
floodplain and say it's not gonna make the floodplain rise? If you,
The intent, from my understanding, is to avoid development in the floodplain because of all the problems that it creates. And I mean, personally, anecdotally, driving around the city, looking at other stuff, I have had citizens flag me down, and when they find out that I'm in the city engineer seat, they go, "I've got a flooding problem on my property. What can you do about it?" And I go, "I'm sorry that somebody built your stuff in a floodplain, but you built in the floodplain." And so from an engineering standpoint, I would advocate that we try to discourage as much development inside the 100-year floodplain, which, oh, by the way, those floodplains were developed sometimes 40 years ago when the climate situation was very different. And
Well, they're supposed to be updating those about every 10 to 20 years. Now, I don't know what they are or not.
we're at our most recent is 07.
and that
And it actually
the
And then they
FEMA's
estimate
flood
somewhere.
study
I think
doesn't
it's wrong.
account.
But we haven't, and there is new mapping data out there, it just hasn't been distributed.
I mean, they guessed at where the floodplain was, didn't they? Or don't they?
Right. So what we have found is that because they're doing such a large area,
Estimate, sir.
they don't
It's like a
necessarily
legal
capture
fee.
the granular detail on the ground that's necessary for a lot level assessment. So really, we should undertake our own flood study for the city of Newcastle to truly understand where the actual flood threat is. And many cities actually do this. FEMA sort of says, hey, at the 50,000 foot level, this is what we think. But things look a lot different at 50,000 feet than they do at, 500 feet. So again, from an engineering standpoint, I would encourage us to discourage as much development as possible inside the floodplain. It will save
Pretty sure I
the
talked about
resident
that the other day.
heartache.
Down there off of 9 on the north side, didn't we talk about that at length?
Thanks for you send back the pictures.
I can't remember that far back.
But if
I
somebody.
don't have any problem with it, I just wanna make sure that it's pretty common. And you think it is, Jeff? Absolutely. Okay.
And it is one of those check marks in the CRS program.
Well, if this is a one-time fee that reduces ongoing insurance fees.
Right.
That's a win too, I think. I mean, even if it might be expensive, but if it reduces your insurance forever. Ken, you got,
I don't know.
you got more questions?
You gotta make sure.
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 16.
Yeah, I have a motion and second to approve item number 16. All in favor, signify by the great hand. Be unanimously approved. Carl's recommendation. Item 17, special meetings. Anybody want one?
Nope.
We don't have any requests for one. Anybody got any new business? Old business? Shall we adjourn? All in favor?
Do I have to make a motion? For a second?
Yeah, you.
I made the motion.
I
You
second.
raised your hand first.
Or unanimous.
You sure did send that. I missed it.